For over 40 years, a phantom terrorized California, committing a series of absolutely brutal crimes that left entire communities shattered, and the police, well, they were completely baffled. He was a ghost, slipping in and out of homes, leaving behind nothing but a legacy of fear. This is the incredible story of how a revolutionary new technique finally gave that ghost a name and brought him into the light. Okay, just try to imagine this for a second. You survive a horrific, life-altering attack. And then, years later, the phone rings, and it's him, the man who did it, whispering that taunt into your ear. That was the chilling reality for the victims of the Golden State Killer. It shows you he relished the psychological terror just as much as the physical violence. So, how did this whole reign of terror even begin? Well, for that, we have to go all the way back to the quiet, unsuspecting suburban neighborhoods of the 1970s. What is just so incredible here is the sheer audacity of his methods. I mean, this was not some quick smash and grab. No. He would break into a home, tie up the couple, and then he would just linger for hours. He'd eat their food, ransack their belongings, and then just slip away without a trace. He was meticulous, he was silent, and it seemed like he was everywhere at once, completely confounding law enforcement. You know, the confusion was so great that for decades, police didn't even realize they were hunting a single person. Think about that. In Sacramento, he was known as the East Area Rapist. Down south, he became the original Night Stalker. These different nicknames really show you just how fragmented the investigation was. They were chasing shadows in totally different cities, completely unaware they were all being cast by the very same monster. And then, after years of terror, the attacks just stopped. The phantom, he vanished. The trail went completely cold, leaving victims and investigators with no answers for decades. And that wait for justice was just agonizingly long. The crimes start in the 70s, the last known murder was in 1986, and it wasn't until 2001 that DNA technology finally confirmed it was all one man. But even then, they didn't have a name. All they had was a genetic profile. Can you believe that? A 40-year gap between the crimes and an arrest. It's just staggering. But here's what turned out to be absolutely crucial. Even when the case seemed totally hopeless, investigators made one incredibly far-sighted decision. They carefully preserved the DNA evidence. Now, they had no idea what kind of technology the future would hold, but that single choice, well, that would eventually be the key to unlocking the entire case. So, decades passed. Generations of detectives came and went, many retiring without ever solving it. And then, in 2018, a new team decided to try something radical, something that would change forensic science forever. This right here, this was the game changer. They took that cold case DNA, the ghost's only real calling card, and they uploaded it to a public website, GDmatch. You know, a site where everyday people go to trace their family trees. They weren't looking for the killer directly, they were looking for a relative. Anyone at all who shared just a tiny piece of his genetic code. In this new approach, called genetic genealogy, was about to do what 40 years of traditional police work just couldn't. It was about to finally give the phantom a face. So what exactly is genetic genealogy? Well, to put it simply, it's using consumer DNA databases to find a suspect's relatives. We're talking maybe a third or fourth cousin. And then you use old-fashioned detective work, like building family trees from public records, to zero in on the person you're actually looking for. It's this powerful fusion of brand new tech and old-school investigation. It's really a four-step process, and it works just like this. First, they upload the crime scene DNA. Second, the database flags any distant relatives. This is the crucial spark. Third, investigators basically become genealogists, building out a massive family tree from those relatives using public records. And finally, they trace that tree forward through generations until they land on one person who fits the profile. The right age, the right location, the right gender. So after painstakingly building this family tree with literally thousands of names on it, investigators narrowed it down to just one man. And the truth of who he was, well, it was more shocking than anyone could have possibly imagined. The monster, who had haunted California for decades, was Joseph James DeAngelo, a 72-year-old grandfather living a quiet life in a Sacramento suburb. The contrast is it's staggering. The brutal killer was a former police officer. The phantom who evaded capture for 40 years was just a quiet neighbor,
a guy who retired from working at a grocery store. Investigators collected his DNA from a discarded tissue, and it was a perfect match. The ghost finally had a name.
When they finally arrested him right outside his own home, the reign of terror ended not with a bang, but with a quiet, pathetic, muttered confession. "I did all that," he said to himself, alone in an interrogation room. After decades of monstrous power, his final words were just those of weakness. But the capture of Joseph DeAngelo, it wasn't just the end of one case. It was the beginning of a whole new era in crime solving. Since his arrest in 2018, this exact same technique has been used to solve, get this, hundreds of other cold cases. We're talking murders and assaults that had been dormant for decades. They're now being closed, all because of the precedent that was set in the hunt for the Golden State Killer. And really, when you step back, the ironies of this case are just staggering. He was a cop, and he used his inside knowledge of investigations to become the perfect criminal. He planned everything, studying his victims' routines for weeks. But in the end, he was caught by something he could never have planned for, a combination of his own family's DNA and a technology that didn't even exist when he committed his crimes. So this leaves us with a really fascinating question for our modern age. The technique that caught a monster relies on the voluntary sharing of genetic information by ordinary people, and it forces us to weigh the needs of justice against the future of personal privacy. How we, as a society, answer that question, well, that's going to shape the future of crime solving for generations to come.